This video is going to look at some of the cars that have passed through my hands over the years. A wild and varied bunch of motors for sure. It's going to run from the mid-90s right up to about 2010. And we'll do more recent stuff in another video. So let's start with me on my school work experience as a 15-year-old. That is me driving a Discovery 200 TDI prototype. And yeah, it was the best work experience ever. My friends were quite jealous. And yeah, this was the start of petrolhead heaven. 2 years later, my parents bought me my first car, this shabby Fiesta Popular in gorgeous red with many dents and scars already. Poor thing had a rather hard life and it was eventually scrapped. And then I bought, as an 18-year-old, my first car myself, and I chose this 2CV. The number plate is still in my garage, you may have seen it. The chassis from that went under this 2CV. Which is a blue one, that was misty blue, and then there was a Diane that's missing before I got this lovely grey 2CV, which was actually given to me in 1998, which was also the year I bought a BX. Well, it might have been early 99, but I stupidly traded in the BX for a certain Matiz. Here she is. I think this is the year 2000, and I think that photo was taken just before this photo, which is Ellie. Just after I bought Ellie, I had to replace her gearbox because it was leaking oil everywhere. And this is the two cars outside my house in Birmingham. And yeah, that's now best part of 18 years ago. Replaced the Matiz with a Subaru Impreza Sport, which I crashed after 3 or 4 days of ownership, I think. Not a great start. But here's a very early photo of Ellie on the London to Brighton 2CV run, and I think 2000 or 2001. And this is 2002, it's the day she hit 100,000 miles, and I took her to Snowdonia. And then I pulled her apart for a rather necessary rebuild. Shipped the body shell off to be welded up. It came back on a galvanised chassis, and I rebuilt her, got back on the road in 2003. And in 2003 I was also a trendy city boy with a Peugeot 306D Turbo that I thought would impress ladies. Mrs. HubNut rather preferred my 2CV, and that was the fleet at the time. See that gorgeous tobacco leaf Rover P6 at the back? Let's have a closer look at that. That's Tabitha J. Camelcack, and a wonderful car, but by heck did she cost me some money. I was earning quite a lot at the time to be a 25-year-old running one of these as an IT support vehicle, be carrying computers around in it, and we even took it to Wales. I think this is Clarach, not too far away from here. And yeah, it's a wonderful car. We had some great times. And then I replaced it with an Isuzu Trooper because I'm an idiot, and the Trooper was terrible. And it was horrible on the road, and it was awful off the road as well. There it is stuck because it's got no axle articulation. Absolutely dreadful thing. We'll just have a look inside, and yeah, huge gear lever, and I remember the gear ratios were terrible. The best bit about the Trooper was sending it in for a service and getting a Matiz as a courtesy car. Very strange to be a pre-facelift one on an 02 plate. Never did quite get to the bottom of that. Replaced the Trooper with an Audi 100 5-cylinder, which sounded very nice, but was just so tediously dull. So I'm afraid that one didn't hang around. I sold it and bought a Citroen BX 16 valve, which was terrifyingly quick. And yes, that is the best photo I have of it. But too quick, so I replaced it with a Rover 400. Although I actually got the 400 because I was intending to replace Mrs. HubNut's Citroen AX, which was very sheddy, and no, she didn't ever clean it, but she hated the Rover, so we were forced to buy a Mini, and that's her cleaning her Mini on the first day of ownership. That's Betsy, and I think we owned Betsy for something like 6 years. It was definitely a keeper. This is our old house in Northamptonshire, and what a pretty place it was. Inevitably the Mini went rusty. After a few years, that's when we'd moved to Cambridgeshire, all covered in winter muck. So it was an inevitable rebuild and restoration, and the work was carried out by Caroline's Cars in Norfolk. And Caroline's still trading today, very pleased to say. There she is, handing the keys to Mrs. HubNut with the work completed. That was all good. And here's Mrs. HubNut checking the points gap on her Mini because I got so sick of doing it. I thought I'd let her do it instead. And that's the day we say goodbye to the Mini, and it's just about to drive off with its new owners. But if we go back slightly, because that's 2012, so we jump back to 2006, I think this is. I bought a Maestro as a daily runner, 1.3L. Didn't really get on with it. It was bought by someone who wanted it for a Mini, not knowing the engines are almost completely different. Never mind, eh? I replaced the Maestro with this LDV 400 beavertail because I thought I'd get in the vehicle delivery business, and that was picking it up. That's my first job, my mate's Mahari that I was moving, but I soon learned that's a terrible way to earn a living. Full respect to people who do it. So I used the van to collect projects instead, like this miniMetro 1.3L that I purchased from a friend of mine in Birmingham. It was a bit ratty, but it was great fun to drive, and had a lot of fun with that car. And if you look in this picture of it, you can just see a brown Allegro behind it, but it's not an Allegro. It is in fact a Vanden Plas Princess, or a Vanden Plas Princess. I think I'm going to go for Plas from now on because I've heard people in the factory saying that. So that's the poshest version of the Allegro. Look at that, Vanden Plas 1500. And of course, if it's a Vanden Plas, it means it has picnic tables. Whoa. Yeah, sadly I never got that car on the road because we moved house. And we moved house using this Citroen H van as well as some other vehicles. There's a piano in the back of it, which we still have. And we bought the H van because we wanted to take it to Sweden and the 2CV World Meeting. And that's before we set off. This is in Germany when it was 22 degrees at night and we couldn't cool the thing down. Trying to sleep in it was horrendous. We quickly discovered life on the road isn't romantic. But we did see lots of interesting American cars in Sweden on their way to Västerås for the big power meet that still takes place. And then we went to Norway and saw all the mountains and everything. A terrible vehicle for a long trip, but yeah, we made it. And that was the fleet at our new house in 2007. Honda Civic was a good car. £185 that cost me. Great little car. Twin carburetors. 1.4, did 45 mpg and went like stink, and that was soon joined by a Volvo for £150. That was not such a great buy. It was a bit of a dog. It refused to idle when cold and once dumped a load of water on Mrs. HubNut's head from a dodgy sunroof. I used it to drag away the Metro after the Metro dropped a valve. That was sadly the end of that Metro. I don't think the next person ever got it back on the road. So I replaced the Metro with a Renault 5, a very early Renault 5. I had to take it on a photo shoot for some fancy big book. And yes, that is a Ferrari Daytona that it shared the limelight with that day. But a very early Renault 5 with a dash gear change. And a lovely little car. If I'd had a barn, I would have kept it. But I didn't, so I sold it. And now sadly it's been scrapped. Bits of it live on. So I then got a far more sensible Mercedes 300D, W123. 5-cylinder with a 4-speed auto. Not a quick car, but it did work even when it was that cold. And I ran it on biodiesel, and it always smelt of veg oil and chip shops. Very slow but fun. And that's it with a Vauxhall 2300S from the Vauxhall Heritage fleet that I'd borrowed on occasion. I swapped the Mercedes for a packet of cash, a Rover P6 and a Subaru Legacy, and thought I was quids in, but by heck did this car eat up some money. My second P6, just a 2-litre single carb this time, and frustratingly slow, didn't sound as nice, and you had to spank the hell out of it to get down the road. So I didn't greatly enjoy it, but the Legacy was a nice motor, but I never got better than 27 mpg. Drove it all the way to France once. Nice load lugger, made a nice noise, just a bit too dull, especially in retail silver. So time for something a bit more colourful. How about this Bedford CF that I bought off a friend of mine? Lovely 2.3 litre engine, overdrive gearbox. And while I own that, I bought this BX. But you know, I was thinking, this BX, it's 1.9 diesel. It's a bit plain compared to that there Bedford CF, isn't it? So we decided to liven it up. We only bought it to take on a banger rally, although it was a BX rally and a lot of the BXs were actually quite nice. and I loved the car so much on this trip that I decided to keep it. I ran it as a daily driver for about 18 months. It's one of very few cars I've owned for over a year. Quite remarkable. And that's it. There's some mountain range in France in the background. We did have a coolant leak on that trip, and that's us where we had to hastily top up the coolant on top of a mountain, the Col de Galibier, which I must return to one day. But yeah, fantastic event. Me and my mate Matt spent 2 weeks driving around the perimeter of France. That's at the museum at Loec. Wonderful museum, well worth checking out. And that's near the end when the madness was starting to kick in a bit. It had been a very long trip and we were missing home. But this photo you may have seen on the YouTube channel, that is from that trip. That is a French scrapyard. And yes, I do want to try and start that BX. Came back and rescued this Bond Equipe from the scrappage scheme, and then wished I hadn't, because it was absolutely awful. I should have just let the thing get scrapped. Poured tons and tons of money into it, and it generally didn't work and was horrible to drive. This is a rare occasion where it actually made it to work. And this next photo is the day I sold it, and the poor new owner trying to make it work so we can drive home. For some reason he thought it would be a good idea to swap it for this Saab 900. Not a bad little Saab, quite enjoyed it, but didn't really bond with it. So I got a Renault 21 Monaco instead, and that was a fine car. Bought as a non-runner, gorgeous leather seats. I changed the starter motor, getting that out was fun, but eventually managed it. And yeah, nice car. It would do 35 to the gallon. I fitted yellow headlamp bulbs. It was very nice, and that was part of this fleet in 2008 or 9, I think that is. But ultimately the Renault 21 was too dull compared to the BX, so I kept the BX, got rid of that and swapped the Renault for a CX instead, 2.5 RI Familiale. Drank a lot of fuel, was quite awful. That's not awful for the right reasons. It was a bad example. 2CV I bought for parts, never did anything with it, sold it complete. Austin Westminster 1955 A90, that was a stunning car that I bought in 2010. Look at that, you got full leather seats, column gear change, and the best bit was it had a twin carb upgrade on the 6-cylinder engine, so it went like stink. I used to commute to work in it at 80 miles an hour. Absolutely wonderful. Just before we finish, this is Ellie when she got attacked by a Ford Mondeo in 2006, just after she'd had that second rebuild, sorry, and this is once she was all straightened out again. She is the one constant on the fleet. She has always been there since the year 2000, and yeah, I can't imagine life without this car. We've done so much together over the years. But anyway, there'll be another video coming on more recent developments. That's Ellie at the NEC in 2007. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed watching. Don't forget to subscribe before you go. And I shall see you in another video that's just me talking over a load of photographs. Thank you very much for watching. Oh yeah, 2CVs, great for green laning. See you next time.